If I can introduce myself quickly, I'm Andrew. I've been a brewer since forever, and that's all I've ever known is making beer. It started in high school. All right, so today we're going to be drinking, or we're going to be tasting a amber ale, the Jack Black amber ale, lumberjack amber ale. This beer is about the malt. Okay, so we're going to go through the way I taste beers. Pour yourself, you all got a nice glass. Not supposed to be drinking yet, we're tasting. Okay, so the ritual is, we start with a drive-by. Okay, so you guys came from the IPA. If you did this with an IPA, blown away. Some of you guys, the hair's already blown off. Right. Okay. Whereas this beer is a lot more subtle. Okay. So on the drive-by, we're looking for things like light struck. Who knows light struck? What's light struck? Like thunderstruck. Okay. Yes. Skunky. Yes. Not star. So UV light, ultraviolet, reacts with the hops, and it gives us a flavor called light struck or sunstruck, and it smells like rubber, skunky, but we don't have skunks in Africa. Rubber, latex, right? If you smell rubber, and I'm going to say it on camera, Castle Light. Okay, yes, Castle Light, I said it. Right, Castle Light out of a bottle. Why? Because out of a bottle, it's green glass. Green glass doesn't protect the product like brown glass does. Okay, so the irony is, brown glass gives you a better beer than green glass because the brown glass protects the beer against UV light. Okay, if you want to understand exactly what light struck tastes like, get a Castle Light, one in a can, one in a bottle. Test, control, in the sun, 10, 15 minutes, full sunlight, and then smell. Right, you are talking nanograms per liter is what we can smell. Okay, so we don't have that here, comes out of a brown bottle. Now, we've done the drive-by, we might also pick up sulfurs, H2S. Right, none in here. Lovely. Now put your nose into the glass. Long, smell that malt. Smell that. It's like someone's opened the bag of crystal malt and you put your head inside. Okay, malt. Speciality malts. Okay, but long sniffs. Because this isn't in your face. This is for people who are a little bit more subtle. Okay, now, so that is your aroma. No light struck, lovely malty aroma. Amber ale is about the malt. Okay, it's all about the malt. Right, then looking at the color. Should be clear, mostly clear, and it should be beautiful orange, light brown colors. Okay. On the nose, important. With an amber ale, no burnt. Burnt is wrong. So if you're getting this color from a black malt, you'll get burnt flavors, and that's a fault. So it's not just about the color, it's about how you get the color. Okay. All right, so now, ready? Now we can sip. All right. All right. No shooters here. Right. Let's take a nice sip, a nice big sip, swirl it round and swallow. Right. Right. Two big flavors we get. We get malty sweetness. Right? On that initial swirl. And then as you swallow, bitterness. Okay, so this beer, the bitterness, or the hops is in bittering. It's no aroma. Because aroma hops would clash with the maltiness. It would mask, it would fight. You need to have in a beer, a well-made beer has one focal point. If you look at a masterpiece artwork from the Italian masters, there's always one focal point. Okay, and that's what the focal point here is, malt. The bitterness is there, supporting role. Right. Okay, let's do it again. Swirl round, swallow. Now rub your tongue against the top of the mouth. What's that? Part of it is hops, but we describe it astringency, right? If you think black tea, you know where you've made tea in a mug, with a tea bag in a mug, and you forgot it, right? You put it in and you got sidetracked, and you come back and you drink that tea. That's astringency. Okay, now that astringency comes mainly from the hops. It can be supported by, you can get astringency from the salts. So if you put lots of sulfates in the water, calcium sulfate, magnesium sulfate, that also gives you that drying palate. But now that dryness has been used in this beer to balance the sweetness of the malt. Okay. Now, the bitterness. This is quite an assertive bitterness. This is not for sissies, all right? This is a beer drinker's beer. But that bitterness, it's there. But what I want you to notice is, as that bitterness dies away, like a good curry, it nudges you, it winks at you, it says, come on, go for it. I dare you. Have another sip. And then you have another sip. Wow, that's bitter. And then the bitterness dies away. And so a good beer should keep bringing you back for more. Right? As the bitterness, if the bitterness is over the top and you get through half a glass, you think, oh man, am I going to finish this beer? Right? That's a sign of a not so good beer, right? What I want you, as a brewer, I want you to get to the end of the beer and say, geez, who drank my beer? Okay, there must be, did I finish it already? Okay, so when you're designing a beer, let's look at the design of this beer. They've used specialty malts here, crystal malt, amber malt, to get the color. Maybe a little bit of black malt, but not, if there's too much black malt, we'll pick up the burnt flavor. Burnt flavor is wrong. So crystal, amber, maybe some Munich malts, right? And remember, your base malt is always a pale malt. So we've probably got 85% pale malt and 15% specialty malts. Right, and that 15% will be crystal malt, which gives you the sweetness, amber malt, which gives you dry, biscuity flavors. And both of them will give you color. Okay, so that's into the mash tun. I'm guessing high on sulfates because it's dry. So the water, they're using the calcium sulfate, not a calcium chloride, to get the calcium in. Okay, then bitterness. This is quite a bitter beer. All right. Ballpark figures, just to give you guys a calibration. So 30, 35, right? No, yes. I said round numbers, not even numbers, right? So a black label. What's the bitterness in a black label? Let's just give you, I'm trying to calibrate you guys. So 16 BUs. So at 12 bitterness units is about the threshold for bitterness. So wheat beer is about 12 to 14 BUs, where you can only just taste it. Then we go to a Castle, 22. Milk Stout, 30, right? And then, so this is more bitter than a Castle, and I'm going to go 35, maybe even 40 BUs. Say again? What does it say on the bottle? 40. There we go. So 40 is twice as bitter as a Castle. Now, the bitterness, you need this bitterness to balance the maltiness. Okay. Otherwise, it could become too sweet. Right. So that gives us our maltiness, our bitterness. Then it goes into fermentation. What flavors do we get from let's stop at the word kettle. No aroma hops. Right? When do we add aroma hops? Last 10 minutes of boil. So we don't want hop aromas, so we want all the volatiles out. So all the bitterness will be added start of the boil. Okay. And maybe I might sneak in a second bittering at about 30 minutes into the boil, because I know the volatiles will go out, but I'll be left with about half of the bitterness. Okay, so no hop aroma. That would be wrong. Okay. Fermentation. What flavors are we getting from fermentation? What yeast flavor? So we get phenols. Okay. That could be, yes. So let's go. So phenols, 4-vinyl guaiacol is a phenol, a yeast phenol that we find in wheat beer, particular to wheat beer, because that yeast has a certain gene in it that produces this flavor. And only ale yeasts have that gene. Lager yeasts don't have that gene, by the way. So we don't want yeast phenols. Wheat beer, Weizen, has that phenol. Okay. What other flavors are we getting? Sulfurs. Example? What's a boiled egg one? H2S. Right, so H2S, smells like boiled egg, the yolk of a boiled egg. And that comes from a poor fermentation normally. So slow, if the yeast is struggling to ferment, you'll get more H2S, unhealthy yeast. There's another subtlety. Lager yeasts have about 5 times as many genes producing sulfurs as ale yeasts. So ale yeasts produce far less sulfurs than lagers, lager yeasts. Okay, so this is an ale, no sulfurs, shouldn't be. Okay. What are the other yeast flavors? You shut up. With respect. Tuckies, yay tucks. Come on. What are the other yeast flavors? Where are my microbiologists and my biochemists? If you avoid eye contact, I know you're not an engineer. The engineers are too arrogant. So Marmite flavors. Ooh, Marmite is coming from yeast. So when yeast is autolyzed, if you leave your yeast in the beer too long, you can get Marmite flavors. Not getting it in this one, thank goodness, because that's a negative flavor. All right. So we've got 2 negative flavors. Positive flavors from yeast. Esters. You're tasting the IPA. Nice, fruity flavors, right? Banana. What's banana ester? Come on, what's a banana ester? Champion. Give me 5. There we go. Isoamyl acetates. Right? That fruity banana. Right? Ethyl hexanoate, which is a red apple, which you get on a black label. Okay. Heineken has got the isoamyl acetate. That's their favorite flavor, besides the light struck. Okay. Okay, so this beer is not so much about the fermentation flavors. Okay. Right, any questions? Any questions? Come on. Have a bite to eat. The brosen are good. The chips are pretty good. So there's a professor, Charlie Bamforth. He's now retired. He was at University of California, Los Angeles, Davis campus. And he did a couple of serious academic articles. Well, he's an Englishman in the UK, so his idea of serious is a little bit quirky. So he did some papers. Can beer be considered a reasonable source of dietary fiber? So first of all, you need to define what is a reasonable source, right? So what's a RDA, recommended daily allowance, and what is reasonable? And I think it needs to be 15% of RDA. Okay? And then he went and got beers from across the world, and he tested for dietary fiber. And yes, beers can be considered a reasonable source of fiber, especially your stouts with higher unfermentable sugars and residual carbohydrates. He then did another one, can beers be a reasonable source of vitamins? Okay, so that one was Charlie Bamforth. He was quite an eccentric Englishman. I think when you get to professor level, you're allowed to be a little bit eccentric. And in fact, as students, we actually look to these people to be eccentric, a little bit off center, to inspire us to greater things. But yes, his one is beer is proof that God loves humans, and I forget the whole quote. Okay, any other questions? Where are you guys from? UJ, just down the road. I'm in the Vaal, so UJ is just up the road from us. Okay, lekker. And are you guys ready this year? You've got that bunch of hooligans over there. I know a couple of them, and a couple of them, so yes. All right, and a couple of them, I recognize some other hooligans. How are you doing? All good. All right, and some fresh hooligans. I've never met you guys.
Yeah, I know the sponsors. We part of Barca.
Okay, all right. Good. Okay. Other questions? Other comments? Comments? None yet. Tastes better than wine. Much better than sour grapes. Okay, so the question here is, what hop do we think's in here? So guys, I think this is one of those things. I spoke with the last group about the 10,000 hours. You guys all know Malcolm Gladwell. I don't get a punt for his book, but it's he's one of my favorite popular science authors, and he talks about 10,000 hours. 10,000 hours, by the time you've done 10,000 hours, 10,000 active hours, focus hours. Not like the youth of today. I'm in the class, lecturers talking, but it doesn't count. You have to be focused and writing. Okay. So once you've got the 10,000 hours, you get to understand things. So let's go through this. What kind of hops? Honestly, it doesn't matter, because the hops is all bittering. So you could use, and this is where you can go for copying a clone, so you can read the internet and what hops do they use, but then we need to import them. Or you could just phone George and buy the South African hops, because it's all about the bitterness. Okay, and so anyone who's using imported hops for bittering, especially expensive imported hops like SARS hops, Peroni is one of my favorite beers ever. Peroni uses SARS hops for bittering. That's a kind of luxury that we really don't have in Africa. Hansa uses South African hops for bittering, but then SARS hops as aroma. I think they could up the aroma, personally. Peroni is just, because they've used this SARS hop for bittering and for aroma, it really does come out as a classy beer. Okay, and the irony of Peroni is they don't punt the fact that they're using probably one of the world's most expensive hops to get bitterness. Nastro Azzurro. Yeah. Yeah, I just know the Nastro Azzurro, and it's, yeah, the blue label. I think it's blue ribbon, yeah. Yeah, that's exactly it. And you see, this is like Italians. You know, every culture has something in it that they're really good at. And Italians, they understand class, right? They don't understand costs, but they understand class, right? Lamborghini, Ferrari, it's not, if you have to ask about the price, you can't afford it. Okay. But Into, it's something. I don't know what it is, but it's something. All right. Maybe yes, maybe no. Good. Other questions? Right, what was your, so this is your fourth group. Which was the favorite? Third, so far. What's your favorite? Let's hear. Favorite beer? And you're not allowed to say Heineken because that's not one of the tasters. There you go. So the question there was, favorite beer, which style? Which style? The Weiss. Okay. So Weiss is interesting. Weiss is a beer that is incredibly personal. For South Africans, in my experience, wheat beers, South Africans are 50-50. Either they absolutely adore it, or they are completely disgusted and disinterested. You know, and yet you get a wheat beer and you give it to a German or a Belgian or a Bavarian, which is like, the Bavarians are like the Free Staters of Germany, right? They're a little bit, I don't want to say unrefined, less refined, and quite dogmatic, right? But you give a Bavarian a wheat beer, and you just see the tears starting to form, right? It's like when a South African sees a Springbok rugby jersey overseas. My people, right? I don't care who you are. You're wearing a rugby jersey. You are one of my people. Okay, so wheat beers are, okay, so that was your favorite. Another favorite? Come on, the maltiness has got to be there. Okay, so let me tell you one last thing about this, the malty beers. The beers using crystal malt, very important. There's a small fault in this beer. Small fault. It's not fresh. How do I know? There's just something itsy that's not there. So, especially as the beer gets warmer, the crystal malt, the toffee, there's a slight flat spot.
It gets light struck faster in these small glasses.
No, so what I'm tasting is not light struck, slightly oxidized. So this has been in bottle for a while. and it's probably been on a shelf at ambient temperatures. So it's not a technical fault, or it's a technical fault, it's not a style fault. It's this bottle, or this case of beers. How do you get around it? Make sure you just in time. You pack 4 days before the competition, you ship it in a cool bag,